It doesn't seem so long ago that I gave a talk about Epiacum, so on the spur of the moment I thought, what can I say that's different? A different way of looking at things, and some new information and more information about things I've skated over in the past. So we shall see. There should be something new for everybody anyway. So Whitley Castle, or Epiacum as it is now, generally accepted, which is a good thing. It's not really scripted, this, so I'll probably be jumping about. I try to stick to a script these days, just in case I wander off and can't get back again. But anyway, I'm going to wander. So here we are from Friday the 27th of October 2017. And here's the lady who's the brains behind it all. Very dedicated, Elaine Edgar, the wife of the farmer John Edgar. She's not a farmer's wife, she's quite specific about that. She's the wife of a farmer. Ask Elaine what the difference is. And for over 30 years, since she was married and went to live at Castle Nook Farm and realised there was a Roman fort there with her educational background, she thought this is a golden opportunity, get people up to have a look at the Roman fort. And when I first met her in 1994, knocked on the door, said, "Please, can I look at your Roman fort?" I said, "Oh, great, I want a tea room, I want a car park." It took her 25 years before it actually happened. And as Steve will tell us later, there's a bit of a sort of double act, because when I finish, Steve will take over from Epiacum, because there are finds there. So things keep happening, things keep turning up. This turned up in 2017. The front, Elaine, to the left of Elaine is the front wall of Castle Nook farmhouse, and at the far end is a barn. And over the door of the barn, when the builder was hacking off the render, what did he see but a Roman altar? And that was last seen in the 1820s when this sketch was made by a mine engineer, surveyor, and a chap who had a general interest in everything, Thomas Sopwith, made this sketch and several others. And then it disappeared. Never to be found again. I don't know if it even got an RIB number, whether we've registered it. But anyway, there's more to say about that. So there's Elaine. More power to her elbow and Steve's elbow. Right-hand man, lieutenant, centurion perhaps of the second corps of earlier. Just to remind ourselves where Epiacum is. So here's Alston. There's Epiacum. Here we've got the Tyne Valley going over into the King's Water, I think. The Eden Valley, there's Penrith, and this is the Roman road running from Carlisle down to York. There's the Staingate, from somewhere near Corbridge to somewhere near Carlisle. And this is a subsidiary road, the Maiden Way, which is in two parts. It comes from Kirby Thorpe, Bremen-Iacum, past Whitley Castle to Magna Carborin at Greenhead. Then it does a sort of dogleg along to Birdoswald and heads off to Bewcastle. So Epiacum, you can see, is about as near halfway as you can get on plan, but the terrain between Epiacum and Kirby Thorpe, you pass by Cross Fell, whereas it's quite an easy 17-mile stroll down to the other part, to the other terminus of Epiacum, of the Maiden Way, sorry. Now, this is my apologies on behalf of Mick. Let's go back again. See, there's Epiacum here on the South Tyne. Here you've got the East Allen and the West Allen. And what Mick Hall would have been talking about is a possible road from Epiacum away off to Corbridge. And east of Allendale, that road has been proved in several places. But west of Allendale, it's all a bit vague, and I was really looking forward to Mick's talk. But poor man, he sounded very poorly when he phoned up this afternoon. So this place, Old Town, is a suspected, a hoped for Roman fort there. And one of the things Mick would have said, it's near Catton. There's the double T-O of Catton, which is off in this direction. So you've got a farm called Old Town and this rectangular shape here, which is quite typical of the Roman marching camps, I think, or pre-Hadrianic forts. They're not the plain card shapes, they're square. So when the first edition of the map, the OS map, was made, the surveyors came along and they saw something there. which would be registered on the first edition map of 1859-1862, second edition of map of the 1890s, and then by the time it reaches a third edition, it doesn't just say site of, it says supposed site of. But hopefully Mick will be able to tell us more about that. I feel frustrated. Why did he have to get ill now? Anyway, so back to Epiacum and Castlenook and Whitlow Farm. Combined farms. You've got Castlenook here, Whitlow there, the River South Tyne here, Gilderdale Burn, the A689 there, the railway here, and Epiacum at the heart of it all. It gets a bit wild up here, but it's not just the Roman forts. You've got the stone quarries, coal mines. Down here there's a lead mine, here an ochre mine, which might have also been an iron mine, limonite. Whitley Sheeling's medieval mysterious settlement, could it be a deserted village? And down here, as you cross over the A689 heading towards Carlisle, in fact it's better from the railway, there's a field here with mysterious lumps and bumps there, unexplored. A medieval bridge abutment that was at first thought to be a Roman one, but it could be a medieval one on the site of a Roman bridge, because it has been a good crossing point until the river moved, that is, and took away the bridge. So this map was the basis of, donkeys years ago, there was a scheme to bring people onto the farm and have several walks, and this became the basis for a mines walk, a walk along the farm between the road and the river, and then a walk up to Whitley Sheelings and a walk around there. And somebody, when I marked out the routes in red, somebody said, oh, they look like letters of the alphabet. So they became the O walk, the P walk, the Q walk, and the Y walk, which I thought was rather novel. They could be revived. So that's Castlenook and Whitlow Farm. I'm seeing the combined farms. When I first knew Elaine, John, her husband, farmed at Castlenook, but her parents still had Whitlow. And when John's mother died, that was the opportunity to combine the farms.
I heard this week, I thought I'd heard it somebody previously, that John's mother, I think possibly it was her father, farmed Vindolanda. And they moved, and John was born at Eels, but it's an interesting connection that the family seems to collect Roman forts in their history. So it's John's, possibly John's grandfather or his mother had been sort of born.
They're following the trail of the Nervians in that case, which will come to. So this is a close-up of Whitley Castle, as it is there on the old second edition Ordnance Survey map. And we'll see the topography, why choose this particular spot, why is it that shape? We'll come to that. This is the A689 Castlenook Farm, heading off towards Carlisle that way, Alston this way, the Lord Burn, nearby source of water. I'll save the rest of it for the slide. So we turn the fort right angles clockwise, and this is what we see. This is taken from, I think this is 2015. Anyway, I borrowed the English Heritage research document to make this plan, where they did the geophys and came up with all sorts of things beneath the soil, shapes, buildings that or enclosed places where you just can't see anything now. You can see the Maiden Way on a good day, it goes right underneath Castlenook Farm. The Lord Burn, as I say, was here. This is the A689, and this is the proposed car park for visitors to Whitley Castle, Epiacum. And this end here is where the cafe is now. But it was just a twinkle in Elaine's eye, let's have a car park. And I was helping out with drawing such plans as I could. That's just a little reminisce there. Now, before English Heritage came on the scene in 2007, I had a friend who was a geophysicist, and I asked him, I didn't pay him out of my own pocket, or at least for one of them, to do 2 surveys, and he came and he looked at the Roman fort here in 2003, and then the external area here to the north. And we'll see that the plan that he arrived at, and English Heritage agrees with. And outside here, we've got the bathhouse here, the old Pennine Way, sorry, the old road, the Pennine Way runs around here. This is the travel lodge, the mansio, or in effect, of the Roman settlements, which you often get outside the Roman fort. And here is just a fringe. It's tantalising. You walk back and forth, my friend, back and forth with the resistivity here, and just reached here by the end of the day, and he was absolutely whacked. And it was a tantalising hint of the vicus, the civilian settlement. But here, this blank spot, it's blank because the Romans didn't build on it. Nobody's done anything with it because it's boggy. It's boggy today, it was boggy in Roman times. Just at the foot of the knoll of the hill on which Epiacum stands, there was something going on. Hints of maybe enclosures or timber huts for livestock, we don't know. So here we have Whitley Castle, Epiacum. And why here? I pointed out there was about halfway between the north end and the south end of the Maiden Way. Not the ideal spot, but halfway would probably be on top of Crossfell, which would be even less convenient. But where it is now, it's a place that can see and be seen. It commands views up and down the South Tyne. Gilderdale Burn and Gilderdale Valley is to our right. This is the Aylburn looking up and over into Northumberland. Down here and over there is the Blackburn Blackclough. So it's a very commanding view. On 3 sides, the north, east and south side, the ground falls away steeply. It's defensible. On the weaker side, where the land is flatter, on the rising ground to where we're standing, this is marshy. So again, it's defense, natural defense. There's only a little narrow ridge of dry land, and that was an approach where just enough room for the civilian settlement to be built. But you notice the hills are usually rounded, and this knoll rises up, it flattens off, and it goes down. It's not natural. The natural shape you'd think would be a slight dome. And this, I think, is the reason why there's no Iron Age settlement to be seen. There's a couple of hut circles which we'll come to, but maybe the main settlement that was Epiacum, the estate of Epius, has disappeared because the Romans, I reckon, and well, not reckon, they did. They flattened the hilltop, they cut the top and filled at the far side, on the downhill side, to make a level platform, but on a sort of like an inclined plane, but at least it's fairly flat, or flat enough to be conveniently terraced. So that's what the Romans did. And there's also, like I said, there's the water supply of the Lord Burn there, but there's a spring. The bathhouse is just about here, and there is a spring that is detected by dowsing, divining with rods. So there was water, very conveniently placed. And you have to imagine a wall maybe 15 feet high or so, with a tower and a gate tower. It would have been stupendous, like as if it had landed from outer space for the people living in their round houses. So, this is what my friend found, who had a company called GeoQuest, and English Heritage found. And when you get your eye in, you can see the lumps and bumps. If you imagine the typical Roman fort, a Hadrianic wall fort, a playing card shape, there's always the Via Principia, the main road running through the fort. I can't remember the Latin names. The front bit and the back bit. And the 3 main buildings where you would find the granary, the headquarters building with 5 rooms. There's always a standard kit of 5 rooms, and the commander's house. Now this is the standard shape, only it's been tilted 30 degrees from the vertical. Everything's leaning 30 degrees over from this baseline here, if you like. And when Thomas Sopwith surveyed it in the 1820s, he found that obtuse angles, acute angles are 30 degrees, and these are obtuse angles are 120 degrees. So the Romans, when they sliced the top of the hill and sliced the top off here and filled there, they still were able to carve out a very geometric shape. But then they had to fit the standard kit of buildings into this very awkward shape. So this front line of buildings here isn't a straight line. The Principia is set back from the granary. The commander's house is set back from the Principia buildings. These front barrack blocks are slightly larger than the ones at the back, English Heritage found, and it's possible that these are cavalry barracks. And certainly if they could gallop out to the east gate and they'd be onto the link road leading them to the Maiden Way. I'll talk about the ramparts again later. I think that's all I want to say about this at the moment. Oh no, I'll talk about something that happened at the Maiden Way, round about here, and it's slightly off the picture that I'm going to show you, unfortunately, but we'll be talking about the Maiden Way a little bit later on. So, again, we've tilted the fort around by 90 degrees, so you've got sort of north-south-ish. And what Whitley Castle, Epiacum, was famous for before anybody knew about it, or before it became what it is today, a visitor attraction, everybody's heard of it within the region. It was famous for its multiple ramparts. I think there are 7 here, and the normal kit, you have the fort perimeter wall, then you have a berm, like a little level platform going round, and then 2 ramparts, and that's usually sufficient. But here, this is the weaker side. As I said, the ground falls away sharply on 3 sides. This is the weaker side, multiple defences. Now, were they built for fun, a manpower services scheme? What do you do with 500 fit and active men? Although they weren't all there at the same time, get them digging, get them to lose some sweat. Or was it necessary for the defence of the fort? That's actually slightly a bit off-piece. That's part of the other talk I gave. It's hard to keep on track. What else do we have here? It was found, Stuart Ainsworth of Time Team fame, he was the instigator of the English Heritage Project, and I was actually happy to be with him when we were standing here on the fort looking down over this flat land. And there was human occupation here, there was huts and little paddocks here, people living there, and this lovely piece of flat land. Why was this not built on? Why did the civilians live here? And Stuart wondered if that was the parade ground. And a few years later, when he organised a dig at an Iron Age hut settlement down here, which I'll point out, he sent a little detachment of diggers here, and not far beneath the soil was a paved surface. This is the parade ground. What else have we got? We've got, I said that before I knew better, looking for a British settlement before the Roman fort, I looked at this donut shaped here. I thought, that looks unnatural. But then somebody who knows about geology said, no, the way this has worked, this is just a slump in the hillside. The hillside has slumped away, and that's as far as it got. So that's a natural feature.
Could you point out the bathhouse, because as it sits outside the ramparts, and that the bathhouse is to the north, it's to the
Sorry, yeah, there are other Iron Age hut circles, but this is something which I'm curious about. These things didn't show up on the geophys. You see here, there's a semicircle attached to a rectangle, and more straight lines there. I don't think they show up on the English Heritage Survey. So there are still things to discover. English Heritage came along in 2007. What's that? 18 years ago, my glory. And produced this report in 2009. It's about 132 pages, and it superseded my little booklet of 32 pages. 3 copies left. When they're gone, they're on sale at good value at £3.50, he said. until the second bigger bumper edition appears, which goodness knows when. Anyway, 132 pages. The reference number, if you look for this online, the research report series are online. You can read this digitally. So they came along and produced this paper copy, which I have, and this is a really good aerial photograph of the fort. Not in the book is this map. Teams of people walked a square kilometre, and every little splodge there is a number. Lots of lines. They recorded every instance of human activity, whether it was a drainage ditch, field, I don't know about field wall, plough marks. They recorded everything. Here we've got an Iron Age hut settlement. These are sinkholes, I think. There's a mine heap here. There's an interesting shape somewhere up there. And they just recorded everything. No, this isn't online. This didn't get published, this bit, because it's actually quite boring, most of it. But then the bits that were interesting, they did incorporate in that report. So back to Whitley Castle, Epiacum, and I really want, when I first saw it, I want people to dig, let's dig and find out. Because the things that English Heritage did, for all the wonderful geophys, they found trackways and shapes underneath the soil, but what they could never do is to tell a story of who lived there, how they lived there, when did they live there. They can get the stratification that this track was overlaid by a track which was overlaid by a wall, but when and how. Anyway, I got quite excited. Let's dig and find out. But the archaeologists, the powers that be, are very keen to preserve Epiacum as it is because of the state of its preservation. It hasn't been ploughed over, it hasn't been built on, and they love it. But for visitors who want to come and see a Roman fort, it takes a guide to sort of paint word pictures to say, here was this, here was that. Otherwise, you're just looking at lumps and bumps in the ground. Now, here we've got the Via Principia that I talked about, the main road across there. We've got the infantry barracks for the auxiliary second cohort of Nergates. Who the cavalry regiment was at the front of the fort, we don't know. But you can see quite clear a set of rectangles. This is the Principia, the control centre. And you can count, when you walk across, you can count the 5 rooms. The central room was the room of the standards. If you go to, I forget whether it's Vindolanda or Magna, they've got a good example of what that room would contain. And at Chester's, there is a vaulted half cellar. It's half a cellar, half sticks up. And that was the strong room for the pay, where they kept the cash. Now, somewhere around about here, at the back of the Principia, you can see, sticking out the back, is a sunken room. And in the soil is a sort of half a barrel shape, and maybe, I like to think in my fond imagination, it's the collapsed stone vaulted ceiling for the strong room. That's where the gold is. Yeah, we've got the ramparts. Talk about the ramparts, multiple ramparts. But when you go and stand here looking this way, you can see there's just a lump here, a misshapen lump. And the ramparts started here to be built with good intent. And here's next to nothing, just this fiddly little sausage thing here. It's unfinished, it's been abandoned. They didn't bother to finish it, it's un-Roman-like, very inefficient. My theory is, and I'd like someone to prove or disprove it, is that when the Romans came back north in AD 369 under Count Theodosius, drove the Picts back over the wall and reclaimed the wall, they abandoned the forts to the north, but to the south they kept hold of things. And I wonder if, while rebuilding Whitley Castle, Epiacum, they just said, oh, don't bother, lads. And they gave up then and there. The latest coin evidence, we'll wait and see if Steve has anything to say, but as far as I know, the latest coin evidence dates from the barbarian incursion the late 4th century. There was no reoccupation, it seems. On the trail of it. This is new research, folks. If you haven't read this online for the Whitley Epiacum, Friends of Epiacum website, this will be news to you. So there's the volunteer group, the second cohort of Nervians. They're the only garrison that we know of by name. And what were they? Tell us more about I needed to find out more about the second cohort of Nervians. So I tracked them down. They came from an area east. This is Belgium and Holland, in case you don't know. This is the River Scheldt. Here's the River Rhine. And they came from this area here, the Lower Rhine, eastern part of Belgium. And they were a Belgic tribe and they were very fierce. They fought Julius Caesar on 3 occasions. I don't know. The first under the leader Bojugnatus in 57 BC, and again in 54 BC, and in 52 BC as part of an alliance. But that was when they were finally defeated and threw in the towel, and they enlisted in the Roman army. And they came, as far as anyone knows, they came to Segedunum, Wall's End, with a new governor of the north of Britain, or maybe new governor of Britain. They came to Wall's End in about 71 AD. And while at Segedunum, the soldiers set up a statuette to Mercury, the text of which reads, "To the god of Mercury, the second cohort of Nervians from the district of," indecipherable, dedicated this statuette. And a military diploma of 98 AD, issued to soldiers who had been honourably discharged after 25 years service or more. The second cohort of Nervians was mentioned then. So they're there, certainly until 98 AD. And perhaps sometime after that, perhaps around about the time that Hadrian's Wall was built, they might have moved to Vindolanda. And it seems as though they were here for most of the 2nd century. This, you'll find, is a temple inside the fort, and it's quite a rarity. These obviously are reconstructions of what was found as recently as 2009. And sadly, it's this rather mutilated, or very mutilated stump of an altar that was dedicated by the second cohort of Nervians to the woodland god Dolichenes, or Kenes. And they were found digging the temple. And there's a bit of a secret religion. It might have been the forerunner of Mithraism. The text, unfortunately, there is a name of an individual who was prefect of the second cohort of Nervians. And their exact movements are unknown, but it seems though it was from this base that the Nervians were sent out to various places. So High Rochester, north of the wall, on detachments, on guard, on patrol. So this one is the 4th cohort of Gauls, 1, 2, 3, 4, Gallian, and the C blank, presume 8 cohort of second Nervians raised this, made this. So at Bremia, they're at Hard Riding, which is dedicated, Dolichenes, I got mixed up with my Roman gods, I'm sorry, it's Cosidius, who was a woodland god. And this altar, which was at Chester's, the Clayton Museum at Chester's Roman fort, very atmospheric. It hasn't been touched for 150 years. It's just as John Clayton set it up. Fascinating, stepping back in time, not just in a Roman sense. Hard riding. So this altar here was found in the foundations of a house at Hard Riding near Melkridge, to the god Decimus Carelius Victor, prefect of the second cohort of Nervians, willingly and deservedly fulfill his vow. We all do. And it's the authority who identified this reckoned it's from the Hadrianic period. And Eric Burley, who was the first owner of Vindolanda Roman fort, believed that the altar was from a shrine rather than from the fort at Vindolanda. Carabra, if you know the Roman wall at all, you know Carabra, and Coventine as well. And this lovely little altar here was found there, almost in the middle of the fort in 1874, where it had been reused as a building stone in the wall of a later Roman structure. And this, as you can see, this little altar is now at Chester's. And this was dedicated to the genius of the place by the Textabri and the Suavevi, members of the detachment from the second cohort of Nervians. And some of your research shows that they might have been affiliated tribes of the Nervians from Belgium, so one of the allies. This is the Chester's diploma, the famous Chester diploma, bronze diploma dated to 146 AD. Found at Chester's in 1879, lists cavalry units and cohorts whose veterans had been honourably discharged. Part of the text reads, "It is decreed that the cavalry and infantry in 3 ally and 11 cohorts who have completed 25 campaigns and who have obtained an honourable discharge and who do not already possess them shall have the rights of Roman citizenship." And included in the Roman citizenship is the right of veterans to marry their common law wives who had been living outside the fort until then, and however many children they had. They might have been living together or been together for many years with the wives following on as the soldiers got posted, but as citizens they couldn't marry. And the list on the diploma includes the second and 6th cohort of Nervians. Now we come to Whitley Castle, Epiacum. So the Nervians were at Vindolanda for at least most of the 2nd century, and when the Emperor Severus came over to Britain in the late 190s to subdue Scotland, or whatever Scotland was, Hibernia, at that time it was a very serious campaign that lasted several years. The Romans, Severus withdrew more or less to consolidate the Roman wall and all the forts around. And it may be around about this time, the early 3rd century, that the Nervians came to Epiacum. So when Severus died and the new emperor was his son Caracalla, the 2nd cohort of Nervians dedicated a temple to Caracalla, and this can be dated to Caracalla's reign, which was something like 211 to 2017. So it's quite a short period. Oh yeah, here we go, 2011 to 2017. Now this is the controversial dedication. It was seen by Reginald Bainbrig, an Appleby schoolmaster, who copied out the text and sent it to William Camden, the famous historian who wrote Britannia, and he worked out the locations of all the Roman forts. And he had this fort Aloni, or Alione, and it didn't quite fit what he wanted it to. He thought Bainbrig had made a mistake with the cohort 2nd Nervio, and he stuck an extra one in there to make it the 3rd cohort of Nervians, which threw historians for about the next 150 years. So it was an honest mistake, but the next historian came after Camden was John Horsley, who wrote the Britannia Romana, and he followed Camden's mistake at first, and then he realised some years later that it was a mistake, and he agreed, he realised it should have been the 2nd cohort. So there was doubt as to which cohort, 2nd or 3rd, it had been. This is a wandering altar. It's from the City Museum at Bedford. In the days when Roman artefacts were given away as presents, novelties, mantelpiece ornaments, garden ornaments. So this particular altar was sold and sold and sold again until it made its way to Turvey Abbey near Bedford. Now, I did phone up the abbey. It's quite a modern abbey, and then I was told that it was in this is in the days before the internet, and I phoned Bedford Museum and asked, "Do you have a Roman altar by any chance from Whitley Castle in Cumbria?" And the lady at the other said, "Hang on, I'll be a moment." And there's sort of stage effect of retreating footsteps. and then a long, anxious, nail-biting pause, and then stage effects of approaching footsteps. And the lady said, "Yes, we've got it." So jumping up and down in Alston, hooray, we've got it. Had the opportunity to visit the place, take this not very good photograph. It's the only altar of its kind in Bedford, and they want to hang on to it, which is a pity. But this is what it is. It's an altar to Hercules in 2 of his 12 labours, and both of which feature snakes. So I wonder, this Caius or Vitellius Aticianus, the centurion of the 6th Legion who willingly and faithfully fulfilled his vow, I wonder if he'd been bitten by a snake and recovered, and he was giving thanks to Hercules for belting 7 shades of whatever out of snakes. But this is one of only 2 individual names, personal names that we know of, unless Steve's got to, no, Steve's shaking his head. So there's still 2 people that we know by name, or not quite people, but personal names. This is the first one. Vitellius Aticianus, Attica, Greece. So he could have been a Greek commander of the 6th Legion. All 3 legions that were stationed here in England, Scotland, the 2nd, the 6th and the 20th, the 9th had disappeared by then. They weren't involved in building Epiacum, but they were the builders. They were the stone merchants, the designers, the architects. This is the other personal name. This piece of, although this says full size, it isn't really, not this size, it's just about that big. It's a piece of Samian ware that was found in the dig, the only dig that's been allowed there in 1957 to 1959, a piece of Samian ware. And on the base is like Maker's mark. And we know the name of the potter is Reburus of Lezoux, west of Lyon. But it's just like, I've got a bit of Wedgwood, I've got a bit of Spode. It's that sort of name. Reburus probably never came, well, certainly never came to Whitley Castle to stamp his bit of pottery. But it's good, we've got 2 personal names. And then we come to the icon of Epiacum, the altar to the sun god. This is the altar which makes the fort datable at least to the mid-2nd century, because this was standing on a stone platform, a rectangular stone platform. Each corner was supported by a short stove, a short column of stones, and on the top of each little pillar was a coin, and they can be dated from about 140 to about 160 AD. And when the Reverend John Hodgson saw it in about 1810 or 1820, he realised that whatever the enclosure had been, water had been flowing around the base of this particular altar. And there is a soggy bit of Whitley Castle where I'll point it out.
Can I just say that to me the important thing about the Apollo altar is not just...
Sorry?
I was say that the important thing about the Apollo altar to me is not just that we happen to use the head as our emblem, but there are 4 gods depicted. It isn't an altar that goes against a wall. It was in a room or space, and there are 4 different gods. There's Apollo, Mithras, and 2 I can't remember or pronounce, but they're possibly Celtic gods, and it was the Romans spread betting as to which god might be relevant. So it's a fairly rare example of
a freestanding altar.
Well, because there's 4 faces.
Yeah.
This is at Newcastle, isn't it?
Yes, I will be saying a little bit more about it. Yeah.
So that's to me, having read the study that was done about it, it came out that these 4
we'll
gods.
come back to this because it's not what I've read about it, so maybe there's a new interpretation of this altar. So this altar is in the Great North Hancock Museum. When these things were found, there were shoe soles. Oh, we'll come to the shoe soles. other bits of stone have been found by chance as well. This, you can't date, you can't associate the second cohort of Nervians with this one. But there's somebody is a proconsul around there, but it's a reconstruction of a building. These are the shoe soles that were found, and they illustrate that there are men, women and children there. It's not simply a military establishment. And these shoe soles were found outside the Roman fort near the bathhouse in the Roman midden, where there was waterlogged conditions. And this is something that's of great concern now with climate change. The ground is drying out. Fragile things like timber and leather, they're just being desiccated because the anaerobic conditions are disappearing. If you go to Vindolanda and Carver and Magna Roman fort, you'll see a little sort of robotic thing, a bit like, not far off, like a camera tripod with a gadget on the top, and it's called Wall-E. It's reading the underground conditions for the acidity and humidity. But these were found, I forget when exactly, but they were whisked off to what was the Blackgate Museum in Newcastle, and then to the Great North Hancock Museum. And let's go back to, and this stone as well is over there. I don't know if it's on display, it's a while since I've been. But the altar to the sun god is one of the prime exhibits at the Great Hancock Museum. And I don't know whether they've changed the tag from Whitley Castle to Epiacum. Interesting to go and see. Now then, Thomas Sopwith, who I've mentioned before, he lived in Alston from about 1825 to about 1830. And as I say, he took an interest in everything. And the first edition of the Handbook to the Roman Wall included Whitley Castle for Collingwood Bruce, I think it was, the chap who wrote it. And Sopwith sketched several things that were found there. This is the altar that we saw that Elaine was standing beside, the one that was found in 2017. Other things were found: a stone head, which we'll see later, an Hercules, I think it is, and a ring, spring rings, all sorts of things were found. There's quite a long list. Crystals with playful light as you hold it up to the sun. Rings, wooden artifacts. Oh yes, the midden. In the bottom of the midden there were vertical timber spikes sticking up, pointed timber spikes, a bit like the Lilia, as they found it was a sort of minefield just outside Roman forts that often rose of these pits with spikes and brushwood. So if anybody fell into these pits, they would impale themselves, just as they would have done in the midden at Whitley Castle, Epiacum. So Sopwith drew all these in fact, this says in 1838, and Mr. John Veitch digging a ditch, he came across a beautiful altar here figured. Oh yeah, this is the altar. In fact, I'd forgotten about this. I thought it was a relative one relating to something else. So this is the altar that's in the Hancock Museum, and these are two of the four sides. The lost altar of Epiacum. Yeah, it was quite exciting. As I said, the builder who was hacking away the render from the front of Castle Luke farmhouse suddenly was faced with this Roman altar. And he's a good builder, and you can't see the join where he's filled in where this Roman altar came from. It was recorded by Horsley of Hodgson in 1810, 1820, and then it disappeared. I don't think it's listed in the Roman inscriptions of Britain because of it. In the background, it's in safekeeping in the Hub Museum. If you want to go and touch and worship at a Roman altar, that's the place to do it. It's a bit indistinct, the pattern on it, and I have a feeling it's unfinished. Here, there's a little ribbing that goes around the plinth of the altar, and I suspect that when this was placed in the wall, and the time came to render over the front of the wall, this little plinth stepped forward was just hacked off to make it flush, because it should have continued around 3 sides. But here, this is what we're looking at. So there would have been this sort of ribbing, stepped little architectural effect around the bottom. And there's a jug and a patera for offering libations to the gods. There would have been a cerubrium or something, a little dish on the top. But the top of the altar is missing. I wonder if it was a practice piece. And this side is extremely rough. I think it was either unfinished or abandoned, or was just a practice piece. It might be actually how it survived. And it had been it had been exposed for a long time in the front of the wall at Castle Luke, because, as you'll see, you go back. Oops. Whoa. Yeah. I'm stealing the old thunder here. There we go. You can hardly make out, but there is the jug, and there's a little pan here. Just make out a circle there with a little hollow in the middle. So it reappeared after being out of sight for about 120 years. And that's what it should have looked like. And this is the altar that we're talking about, the one that's in the Great North Hancock Museum. And this has disappeared, this sort of stone rugby ball on the top. And this could have been the head of a statue to Hercules, because the altar that made its way to Bedford Museum was sold, was presented to the Society of Antiquaries in London. Well, not the altar, but a couple of things associated with it. And one of them was a hand holding a club. I forget, it was a foot as well. But there were fragments of a statue, and they reckoned it was to do with Hercules. And it must have been at least life-size. But the head has disappeared. And there's an old gentleman, or there was an old gentleman, a lovely old gentleman called Tony Alderson, who lived just across the River Valley when he was a child at Kirkhoff School. And this must have happened when he was a little lad. He remembers He remembers this being wrapped up and transported to be taken away to Newcastle, and just how careful everybody was. Oh, mind this, don't touch that. After whoever lived at the farm, with children being climbing all over it, kicking footballs against it, sharpening their knives on it, and others came along with cotton wool to wrap it up and take it away. Now, what Steve said about different gods, you can see here's the radiate crown of the sun god holding, I think it's a club, but here, the description I have, which might have been superseded, I'm going back 20 years, there's a lady called Lindsay Allison Jones who was curator, and she wrote a description of this altar, and it's it's not, unless things have changed, it was just the stages in the ceremony of the worship of the god, the altar god. There's somebody, I can't remember now, they're holding a dish and something else, they're about to offer a libation to the god. Someone is, there's another scene where a figure is on a platform high up, and someone else is, I forget, is kneeling and offering something to the higher up person, maybe a priest. So that was my understanding, was different stages of the worship, of the ceremony, the religious ceremony. But that photograph was taken in the garden of Castle Luke Farm. So a nice garden ornament. And this is a new find, hot off the press, is the Eta stone. Steve will tell, this is part of the double act, Steve will tell us about the Eta stone because it's actually here. So mystery, quite clear, E-T, and either an inverted E. If it's an A, there's no crossbar. But several people have had a look at this, and Steve will reveal all. But the fort is still revealing its secrets, or has secrets to be revealed. And up at Holymire, when you walk up the track from Castle Luke, the Luke farmhouse, from the Luke Cafe, before you head off to the Roman fort. If you were to keep going, you'd reach Holymire Farm, or abandoned farm. At the far end, it was a Basel house. On one side of one of the doors is a stone, and it's got writing on it, and it looks very crude, just similar style to that. It looks not quite like Seamus, because that's not very Roman, but it looks quite similar to that. And I did ask an archaeologist whose name is Brian Young, no, not Brian Young. Anyway, and he said it might not be Roman, a bit of Roman graffiti that's been built into the wall there. And within the wall of the house next door, or that's been tacked onto the Basel house when that fell out of use and became a barn, the house next door, some of the stonework, you can see there's been sort of feathering, if you like, the finishing off, the way that Romans would finesse a stone if it was going to be a building with some status. A few stones like that have been reused in an 18th century farmhouse. Did the Romans mine lead here? Well, the authorities say there's no proof. It's all circumstantial. There's no proof at all. They haven't found the lead ingot that says this lead came from Alston. They haven't found the graffiti that says Jim the Roman was here mining lead, like you get in stone quarries. But what we have here are several inscriptions from lead seals that were found from the Roman fort at Bruff under Stainmore on the A66. And it was from a rubbish dump. These were the discards. It's like a postal sorting office. Packages would arrive, be broken open, repacked and sent on. So what do they tell us? Here we've got C2N, second cohort of Nervians, cohort 2 Nervians. So there's the second cohort of Nervians. Minieri, to do with mine leases. Metallum. So, if the Romans were not mining lead, what was the second cohort of Nervians doing with metal and mines? They were mining lead, for heaven's sake. But where were they mining lead? I don't think we'll ever know, because even within recent 150 years, the London Lead Company would leave its waste heaps. But with improved technology, those waste heaps could be reprocessed to extract more lead and then zinc. And with improved technology, those waste heaps could be reprocessed and reprocessed and reprocessed. So if the Romans found a good site to mine lead, somebody else would have come along and worked the lead heaps, built on the Romans' bait cabins. They would put their own bait cabins there. Everything will have been obliterated. I'd love to think it wasn't, but it's highly unlikely we'll ever know. But I think this is concrete evidence the Romans were mining lead here. So this is the plan that Sopwith drew for one of the handbooks to the Roman fort. But what we're looking at is Sopwith, bless him, he wasn't terribly accurate about the multiple ramparts. We've got the A689 here. The New Road, it's called, in the 1820s, it's called the New Road from Alston to Carlisle. The Old Road is only just the Old Road going round where the Pennine Way is now. And here's the Maiden Way going right under Castlenook Farmhouse. What Sopwith identifies is this area here. This is the bathhouse that we see, built over the ramparts. Now, ramparts are meant as defensive measures, and somebody's built over them. It's as if the ramparts had fallen out of use, there was no need for them. It was quite safe to go and have your bath outside the fort. So peaceful times. There's a clue of the history of the place, I suppose. When troubled times led to peaceful times, that then it was abandoned and all that sort of thing. You could do a lot of interpretation. But we've got the bathhouse here. And on another plan, it shows that this is the temple area and shrines and graveyard. And it's also a wet area here. And that's where the altar to the sun god was found here. And sadly, a lot of this has been quarried out for new agricultural buildings. But if anywhere is to be dug, it'll be there, with the waterlogged conditions. And this here is about where the midden is. And even the time I've been here, it's not nearly so wet as it used to be. So there's a cause for concern. And these, I want to come to that. The only dig that has been authorised, well, in fact, in 1957 to 1959, the Epiacum was not a scheduled site. I don't think it was scheduled until about 1966. So the Durham Archaeology Department organised a dig here, and let's go back. You can see the ghost, the outline of this wall, this really impractical wall that was built across the fort and the ramparts. You can still see it. It's been left just as a landmark to show the part of the history of the fort. But just round about here is where the dig was that we're about to look at. So it's a trench 3 feet wide. Starting here, you can see the ramparts, the magnificent ramparts there. They are spectacular today, but there might be 2 or 3 feet of silt that has been washed away from the tops of the ramparts. So you imagine adding 2 or 3 feet to the top of a rampart and dig out 2 or 3 feet in the ditch, and they must have been, well, they were intended to be formidable. So just inside the fort wall, this is the fort perimeter wall here, and the internal arrangement. So here's the fort wall. The external leaf has collapsed outwards or been totally robbed. The internal leaf fell inwards, and all the stone is still there. It's formed what's called in the report a plastic curve. As it fell inwards, it knocked this wall sideways. You can see it's vertical to a point and it's been pushed sideways. And when you look at this, it's quite obvious there's a sequence of occupation. This is the natural ground. This is one level of the Roman fort with its covert. That was filled in quite drastically to another level with another covert there. So it filled in, whether there's a period of absence of the Romans, I don't know, maybe they came back, reoccupied it. This sequence, this stratigraphy of walls. Now this wall was built on this level, but it was still in existence when the refill came. So it tells a story, but the exciting bit is, the most identified thing, there's a sequence of walls of different qualities here. Some of it's rubble, some of it's well built. The granary is identified as a granary. It's where you would expect to find a granary in the plan of a Roman fort. You've got these sleeper walls here, going to the other wall, opposite wall of the granary, which would be like that. And so you'd have either flagstones or timber joists with flagstones, so that there would be no dampness in storing the grain and maybe keep the rats out as well. So that was 1957 to 1959. And for the next, for the next 50, 60 years, there were no finds made until the molehills started. All right, we're going to look at the Maiden Way now, which I asked you to sort of bear in mind. So, where are we? I lost it. So here's the Maiden Way. No? No.
It's diagonally.
Hang on. There we are. There's the Maiden Way, going this way here. And the loop road going through the fort goes this way. You can tell the zigzag in the field wall still respects the Roman road that ran through the fort. And they join up round about here, round about the well house. This is Holymire. The well house Basel is there, and it's just beside there that a small dig took place. 14 years ago, everything is 14 or 15 or 20. As you get older, things get much more in the distant past. Anyway, this is the short-term dig that was just to explore the nature of the Maiden Way at this point. So there's the profile with a ditch, and not very spectacular, and there's a mysterious wall here as if it's a culvert going under the road, and there's quite between here and Wellhouse Basel, there's a stream or marshy bit, as if there has been a stream here and quite a little declivity there. So whether there was a bridge or a culvert from Maiden Way, I don't suppose we'll ever know. But this is what was found. It's the agar, the curved agar road surface of the Roman road, the Maiden Way. And Paul Frodsham, the archaeologist, was intrigued by this. From what don't quote me on this, but I seem to remember that he was surprised that there was no real evidence of serious repairs or renovations to the road, as if south of the Roman fort it wasn't very heavily used, but that needed further analysis. A couple of times over the years, Paul said he would really like to have a thorough study of the Maiden Way, to take sections like this just to see if this was a one-off case and that the road was heavily used. The thing that surprises me is just how shallow the soil is. Well, it's just the depth of a turf. If you buy turf from a garden centre, it's not much thicker than that. And the Roman remains are just there. So that was away from the fort, not on the scheduled site, so permission just had to go for the high-level stewardship approval rather than the English heritage. So we're into molehills now. 2011, I think it was Paul Frodsham had the idea you can't dig on the Roman fort if you can't stop moles digging, and moles turn things up, and all sorts of things were found in the first 5 seasons, if you like, and then there's a hiatus, and Steve's going to tell us more about phase 2, if you like. So we can date this to the 2nd of July 2013. Alistair Robertson at Epiacum. I could have put Alistair Robertson looking a bit vague and lost there. Everybody else is doing the work and I'm just wondering, what shall I do now? And anyway, when the molehills, nature's little excavators, they hit the headlines in the newspapers, radio, television. I think it was in Germany when they got quite excited about it as well. It made the international headlines. So here's a television crew or radio crew interviewing Paul, I think, while the rest of us are sort of digging. Some finds will turn up. Oh, what I should have said were the Romans digging? Were the Romans after lead? Here we have a piece of lead, galena, found. Oops. Found. This is the headquarters building. Here's the commander's house. It was found just there. 2 lumps of lead. Another one was. This is 2 kilograms, I think. The other one was 5 kilograms. I think it went to Australia by the finders. It was in the days before it was the fort was scheduled, and also some coins of that. But the story to this is a lady called Jean Lund, who took part in the 57 to 59 dig. It was her brother that found this. She fell heir to it, and she had it analysed. If you can handle this, you can see in one place it's been scraped. It's been analysed, and photographs have been sent to geologists, and it's a red herring, it's a plant. It was never part of the Roman occupation, Roman lead mining exploitation going on here, because the surface of it, to the eye of the geologist, showed that it's been affected or altered. So presumably it's been exposed to the elements long before the Romans ever came here. Sort of geological time it's been exposed. So how it came to be there, perhaps some little rascal, I'll just put it there and fool the archaeologists. So anyway, lead has been found at the fort, but it's a complete red herring. So we're nearly at the end of the talk. We're looking at the wider landscape of Epiacum. This is the railway here, which has its own story. South Tyne Railway just appears. This is the A689 coming along here, crossing the Gilderdale Burn, looking towards Alston. This is, and But you can see there's a scar going across the hilltop there. So this is the forerunner of the A689. It goes down to an old bridge abutment, two bridge abutments either side of the Gilderdale burn. And this going up and down must have killed the horses, just the struggle going up the steep hill. So when Macadam came along in the 1820s, he ironed out all the gradients. The main roads that you see now were built in the 1820s to gradients laid out by Thomas Loudon and Macadam. Anyway, he took it easy on the horses, even though it was longer to go round the hill rather than over it. Gilderdale Burn, there's another track coming down here, and this is the Pennine Way now. It must have been a medieval road. It crosses the river here where there are some mines. The Pennine Way comes up around here, where there is an Iron Age settlement, which was dug, and another Iron Age settlement here. There are various mines along here. There's a lime kiln round about there, and more coal mines. A coal mine here, and coal mines over here. We've got a Bassal house, and a Bassal house, and a Bassal house. More Bassal houses. Further up the valley, there's the Whitley Shielings, which again medieval times up to about 1600 there would be a use for transhumance taking the livestock up the valley. To allow the lowland valley, to allow the lowland grassland to recover, and you've got plough marks overlain by field walls. So arable farming, ploughing to grow crops, was abandoned at some time, and field walls were built to contain livestock. So arable became pastoral at some time, and there's all this going on, and there's a lime kiln somewhere around out there. But almost incidentally, you've got a Roman fort. There's a whole lot of history to be discovered. Oh, and the Pennine Way, the old road to Carlisle as well. There's all sorts going on. And like I say, the Roman fort is almost incidental. It just happens to grab the public attention more. So, we have Whitley Castle with all its wonders. And that's a variation on the theme. I might have said something that you didn't know before. I hope you did, and thank you for listening. And now I'll hand it, before you get up and leave or whatever, Steve's got something to show us.
Okay, so I'm Steve Bentley. I'm a trustee with Epiacum Heritage, which has the responsibility for looking after not just Whitley Castle or Epiacum, but also other structures, the Bassal houses on the site. We like to think of it as not just a Roman fort. It's 3,000, possibly 5,000 years of history on the site. And our responsibility is to share the stories and protect the site. It's a LiDAR image, you can see the Maiden Way there. But here's some reconstructions. This is looking across the parade ground. This is looking down. I can send you these, Simon.
It's okay.
It's going through fairly quickly. So that's parade ground. That's looking towards the east. Alistair showed you a photograph of when he was talking about the layout of the site. And so that's looking from the Pennine Way, roughly. This one is looking the other way, up the hill, across towards the Pennine Way. And this is the bathhouse, which sits outside the Roman fort. That's quite clear on some of the geophies and the aerial photographs. Don't want them there. And the Mancio, which hasn't been properly discovered, but that could be there. But it's interesting that the bathhouse sits outside and sits on the ramparts. So it was built at a time when it was safer to do so. They weren't so worried about the ramparts. When I heard that your main speaker wasn't coming and that Alistair was having to step into the breach, I phoned Alistair and said, I happen to have some finds because we're putting an exhibition on with others, as Damien said. Currently, it's got some finds from Operation Jericho. So sadly, my desktop screensaver is Epiacum 4. But there was a wall. Is it an Enclosures Act wall?
Sorry?
Is it an Enclosures Act wall, do you think?
No idea.
Oh, okay. But there was a wall which meant that if you were visiting the site, you had to go to the top first part and then go out and come round this way to get onto the other side.
It's a pain leading a guy.
Yeah, so there's 200 metres of wall were removed by volunteers in some atrocious weather when I was there. And in that wall were found there were a number of finds from the Roman period, principally I think it's 23, possibly 30 part kernstones, and two of those are in the exhibition. But the point was that although that was a one-off exercise, it took 2 or 3 weeks, I think. It's when I first got involved. But these kernstones have been analysed, and they were from the Roman period, and there's different types. But we continue, we've got wallers working on the farm. The farm, I think, gets stewardship money for livestock relevant walls, but for walls that are just on the fort, we have to raise funds to do those. But we're still getting fines, and what we call the Gita stone, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this, the image that, watch the coins that Alistair's found. You can it's very faint. You can just about see the lines, the cut marks. So the waller has been advised to look out for anything strange, and he's pretty good to spot this, really, because it's like when we first saw it, it was wet, wasn't it? Or you had to wet it to get to see the stones. But thanks to Alistair, who I think, did you get in touch with Frances McIntosh? And she sent photographs of it to Roger Tomlin, who's at Wolfson College at Oxford, and he's provided a description here, which is basically that a Gita stone, or the ETA does not appear hardly at all in any of the Roman epigraphy or words. And his interpretation is that it refers to Gita, who was the brother of Caracalla, and they were both, I'm not a historian, so I'm going to...
Were co-emperors.
Co-emperors.
Severus died, but Caracalla wouldn't have that, so he murdered his brother.
Yeah, and so any reference to Gita was defaced, and so the G of Gita. Now this may be a later version where they didn't even put in the G, but it was that's the theory that is going to be written up in Britannica, or is it Britannica? To me, when I first saw it, I thought it could just be, how do you know it's not medieval, or it's just it's just a piece of graffiti? But I'm going with Roger Tomlin because he knows what he's talking about. So, although, and I suppose I should just explain, I'm one of the trustees that's inherited the no-dig policy, and I do hold to that, because I think it's important that you have places where there isn't any digging and you use your imagination as a counterpart to somewhere like Vindolanda, where everything is dug. But that might change. We're not absolutely fixated on that. I mean, if a good reason to dig came along, particularly the Roman fort, then we might be persuaded. In fact, it would be us leading it. But what is happening is that the farm has problems with farms over here. The bathhouse is here, and the midden is about in that position. That is a very boggy area. The farm's water tank is here. And it's not big enough to serve both the cattle and the household. So the farm's invited, with the support of the charity, Historic England to come and have some conversations. And there are 3 things that the farm would like to do or is investigating, which mean that we get a full survey, of a condition monitoring survey of the fort, and and get to understand perhaps what the ground conditions are. Because we're talking about a water supply here and or possibly altering it, there's got to be some hydrology, which will mean we'll understand the ground conditions. And if, like Vindolanda, the ground conditions are deteriorating, or at least the potential finds are deteriorating, it would give us a reason to dig. And if historic England are behind that, then we've got more chance. We still quite like the idea of moles throwing up finds. I'll come to the moles in a moment. But the three things that the farmer are looking to do, this trackway up onto the fells is in a dreadful condition from time to time, and it could be damaging. It could be damaging some archaeology. It's less important archaeology, I'd think. But they want to put a road, a more substantial road that will take their vehicles. They want to do something about the water supply, and these barns were put in, which affects the bank which holds up part of the bathhouse. So that was done quite some years ago, but it wasn't done properly. So funds are being, from the Rural Protection Agency, I think, to address that. All of which means, as a charity, or as the people who are looking after the fort, we have a lease from the farm, so it helps us raise funds. But we will learn a lot more about the fort from the process, and potentially move in the direction of trying to find out more, possibly with a dig. So the stone wall was removed, which gave us some finds. This is an example of a find from a stone wall, from one of the dry stone walls. In fact, I think that stone was found over here. Alistair and I were involved in taking some of this wall down, and we found another kernstone, didn't we? It was near there that there was a stone found. So back to the mole hills then that Alistair mentioned. As he said, they started in 2011. The moles didn't get the message that it was a scheduled ancient monument and you can't dig, so they've been throwing up little bits and pieces. In fact, about 2,000 pieces overall. So for 5 years, from 2011 through to 2015, there were every year in about March, April, an area of mole hills was scraped and searched for finds. And then at the end of that period, none of the finds were analysed. It wasn't so much that the money ran out, it was just that the archaeologists didn't follow it through, and nor did the AONB at the time, who funded the project. So we were sort of left hanging. Then in 2023, we approached what was still the AONB, they're now National Landscapes, but we approached the AONB and said, we've got this idea, we'd like to do a molehill survey, and by the way, would you mind paying for the analysis of the ones that we did, however many, 10 years ago? And they agreed actually to that. And so we've had every find that's been found analysed, and that report is being written, and it's hopefully will be produced this year or early next.
Was there in 2000?
Yes. Oddly enough,
14 years. Oh, this could be done.
Oddly enough, the whole idea of looking at the molehills came from this little chap, and this is a dolphin. Not sure. Did it say? Oh, a copper alloy dolphin, which might have been the end. Sorry, son. Might have been the end of a quay, but it was found at a molehill near the bathhouse, and the idea was born, perhaps we should look at all the other molehills. So that in a way wasn't part of the 2011 surveys, but it kicked the idea off. But then I was just going to invite you to look at the other finds. these have all been drawn ready for the publication, and a couple of weeks ago, one of the other trustees was putting out. We have a couple of trails across the fort. The children's trail is put out every year, so there's clues for the children to follow. And Fran Breen was putting out the trail for us, and she spotted a bead, and she thought, it's illegal to remove things from the fort, but I am a trustee, I am an archaeologist. I've got a GPS, and she's got the location where the bead was found, and she thought it probably on balance best to remove it for safekeeping. And a little bit of research has been done, and it looks very similar to this one which was found in Denmark. So I suppose the story is we're still finding things, and we will continue to find things without actually digging. Yeah.
Bit of volume.
Yes, okay.
Spiel.
Do you want me to do that again?
No, fine.
I can always re-record.
You can. Thanks.
And I think it is an ambition, if we had the funds to repeat the molehill surveys, on an annual basis, or perhaps every 2 years, so that the original molehill surveys were done on 10 metre squares, or 5 metre squares, but they were done in different parts of the fort. In 2023, every molehill was geolocated, so we knew exactly where the finds were in relation to the layout of the fort, and it gives us much more information about, these finds come from this building, or are likely to. But of course, the moles are only little chaps. They can cause some big molehills, but they can only lift up certain things. So they only operate in a certain depth. It is true, probably, that the depth of soil on the fort isn't that great in real terms, but if we were to dig, there might be heavier items to find, as it were. So that was it, really. I just thought, if you want to handle the finds, please put them back in next to where, because I've got to put them back in the bags and make sure. In fact, I'll take a photograph.
My battery's nearly running out.
Just before everyone goes and has a look, a couple of things. One, thank you for coming out on a horrid Cumbrian evening, and I think it was probably, we all agree it was worth coming. But two things. We were up at Epiacum with the Young Archaeology Group, and two things from that. One is the 7 mounds of the defences. Young people, they range between 8 and 12. Took them about 3 minutes, didn't it, to run all the way to the furthest edge. And then we said, no, that's the wrong way, you've got to come back. They ran all the way back so quickly, as if, they're obviously not defensive now, not for young people. And secondly, as we were walking around, we found a piece of really pretty Roman pottery just on the top of a molehill. So you can imagine the amount of molehills there are over the last 1,000 years. All the things that... Was that?
Fran identified it as Samian ware.
Yeah.
And so the amount of moles that they've been throwing up all the time, constantly, and presumably the earth sucks it back in eventually.
Oh, they're quite. I was up on the fort only a couple of weeks ago, and you'd expect the molehills to be quite big, and they're quite flat. So I think I suppose it might have been because it had been dry. I don't know, but I think having scraped all the soil off, it might take a while for the moles to start kicking off again.
When we were digging donkeys years ago, well, my experience was that the best bits were just lying on the top.
Yeah.
Whereas it got deeper in the molehill, there was nothing there.
When we had to, I think we had to bring the 2023 scrape forward, because you're not allowed to dig. If you've got a molehill, you have to just scrape the top. You can't go digging down, theoretically. But the weather was so poor that the molehills were being flattened, and so we brought it forward by a week or so to get the best advantage. And talking about the ramparts, Alistair and I volunteered to help the waller take down a section of wall over the ramparts to the north. I won't bother getting a photograph, but they're really, this wall is really curved and it's a beautiful, it really shows out the ramparts. But we were taking down this wall, and it was, when you were stood in the gap, in the ditch, we were like this, weren't we, taking? So you imagine it was like a good 12 foot. Well, I suppose that'd be with the wall, but it was like 12 foot
Actually, you could
almost.
see just how much silk had been in
Yeah.
the bottom, washed down from the top, so you'd take 2 foot out.
Oh, I thought we were going to have a small clap there.
Oh,
Sorry
I don't know.
We edited neatly.